Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into some really thought-provoking source material you sent us.
Yes, it explores a perspective on emotional strength, expression, well, handling difficult feelings in a way that feels refreshingly different.
Sometimes surprisingly different, yeah. These sources seem to take familiar ideas, honesty, vulnerability, love, and give them a twist.
Definitely. They challenge some, let's say, conventional wisdom, suggesting there's real power, real intelligence in places we might normally just overlook.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack these key ideas, maybe wrestle a bit with the analogies they use. Some are quite striking.
And surface the insights here, yeah. All to help you get a better handle on this, well, this particular model of emotional intelligence.
Get ready, because it might shift how you look at things. We're talking emotions as bonsai trees.
And using sadness to generate power.
Exactly. And even bringing black hole physics into a discussion about love.
It's definitely intriguing stuff.
Okay, let's dive in. The sources really don't hang about, do they? They start right off by challenging these fundamental assumptions. They call it binary dissolution.
Hmm, that's a great place to start.
So what are these pairs they're questioning? And why is breaking them down so central here?
Well, what's fascinating is how they target pairs we usually see as, strict opposites, one good, one bad.
Yeah.
Things like forgiveness versus pain, or truth versus concealment, even need versus acceptance.
Okay.
The source argues that seeing these as just simple binaries, it kind of misses the whole picture, the complexity.
So it's not about picking a side.
Not really, no. It's more about understanding the potential, maybe even the value in the thing we usually try to avoid or dismiss.
And that flows right into challenging this idea that, emotional honesty only counts if you wear it on your sleeve.
Exactly, that you have to show everything to be authentic.
This model seems to pivot pretty hard on that.
It does.
Yeah.
It brings in this idea that invisible love can be deeper than visible need.
Say more about that. Invisible love. Deeper than visible need.
Well, it's not just a catchy phrase, right? It's pointing to the idea that love's depth, its strength, might show up in ways that are quiet.
Subtle. Internal.
Precisely. Not loud, not performative, not needing that external validation or
Constant reaction.
so the deepest emotional stuff might not be the stuff we can easily see or measure.
That's the suggestion, yeah. Which leads us straight into a really core concept here, sacred containment.
Right. And they're very careful to say this isn't just repression.
Very careful, it's crucial.
So if it's not just stuffing feelings down because you're scared or can't handle them, what is sacred containment according to this source?
Well, as it's presented here, sacred containment is an active thing. It's intentional, a choice.
Okay.
It's not passive suppression driven by fear or inability. It's a deliberate holding of emotional energy within.
And the sacred part.
That implies there's a purpose behind it, a value placed on this internal process. Maybe it's about refining the emotion itself, or maybe preventing harm if it just came out uncontrolled.
Could be. Or even building internal capacity. It's restraint. But restraint born from intention, from purpose.
Which then completely reframes vulnerability, doesn't it? The source shifts it from simple exposure to compassionate restraint.
Yeah, that one can feel really counterintuitive, especially with how much we hear about vulnerability today.
Totally. How can restraint be a form of vulnerability, let alone a compassionate one?
It really does challenge the common narrative.
Yeah.
If vulnerability is seen as compassionate restraint, it suggests true strength isn't just about, letting it all hang out.
But
About the capacity to hold back difficult feelings, or maybe overwhelming ones.
But not out of fear.
No, that's key. It's framed as a conscious choice, rooted in care.
Care for what?
What?
Yourself, others.
Maybe both. Care for your own internal, let's say, ecosystem. Care for the impact on others. Care for the integrity of the moment itself.
So it suggests there's this powerful, deliberate internal process happening. And that holding actually takes significant strength.
And self-awareness, yeah.
Okay, this is starting to paint a really different picture of emotional strength. It's less about outward force
Or just pure expression.
and more about this internal holding, this intentionality.
Yeah, it seems the model suggests that real emotional power isn't just found in external release.
But in this powerful, intentional holding, strength in purposeful restraint.
That feels like a key takeaway, definitely. It's a real paradigm shift from, say, an externally focused view of emotional health.
To one that deeply values the internal, deliberate work.
Exactly.
Okay, now this is where it gets really, really interesting for me. the analogies.
Ah, yes, the analogies are quite something.
The source uses these incredible, sometimes almost jarring comparisons to help us grasp these, well, pretty abstract ideas like neural cross connections.
Good way to put it. They really stick in your mind.
Let's dive into them. First one, comparing hiding emotion to bonsai cultivation. What's that telling us about emotional control?
The bonsai thing.
Mm.
It highlights that deliberate, controlled shaping over a long time, right?
Yeah, you don't just let it grow wild.
Exactly. But you're not killing the tree either or denying its fundamental nature. You're guiding its energy.
Pruning,
Yeah.
shaping, carefully.
Right, to create a specific form, beauty, resilience. So applying that to emotions, it suggests hiding or containing isn't necessarily denial.
It's more like skilled gardening.
Kind of.
Yeah.
A skilled, ongoing process of shaping and directing that emotional energy internally for a desired outcome, maybe inner strength.
While still preserving its essence, but giving it form.
Okay.
Okay.
Taking something potentially wild and giving it considered form, yeah.
Then there's emotional aikido. The source links this to saying, it's okay, but sometimes saying it's okay just feels, well, like a lie, or just giving up. How does the source see it as an active, even powerful move?
Well, think about Aikido itself. It's about blending with energy, redirecting it, right?
Yeah.
Not just blocking or meeting force head on.
Okay.
So in this context, saying it's okay isn't necessarily about denying the external reality or pretending the pain isn't there.
It's more internal.
Exactly. It's presented as an internal maneuver, a way to accept the energy of the situation or the feeling.
To avoid getting swept away by it.
Yes. And then redirecting that energy internally towards balance, maybe harmony. It's an active choice, not to just fight the chaos.
But to redirect the flow. Interesting, okay. Then there's this thermodynamic analogy.
Ah, yes. Entropy of the heart.
Right. Wanting more is the entropy of the heart, while acceptance is emotional thermodynamic equilibrium. What state is that equilibrium supposed to represent?
Well, thermodynamics deals with energy and disorder,
Mhm.
right? Entropy measures the disorder, the randomness.
Okay.
So wanting more, especially that restless, grasping kind of longing, it creates internal disorder, hence entropy of the heart.
Makes sense. And acceptance.
Acceptance, in contrast, is shown as reaching the state of, well, emotional thermodynamic equilibrium, balance, settledness, peace.
Where energy isn't just chaotically flying around because of longing.
Pretty much. It's not saying you shouldn't desire anything ever again. It's more about the energy state associated with restless desire versus the peace that comes from accepting the present moment.
Got it. Now, this next one really grabbed me. Sadness transmuted into love compared to using gravity to generate power.
That one is striking, isn't it?
Yeah, because sadness usually feels so heavy, so draining. How on earth can it generate power, let alone love?
It really challenges how we view difficult emotions. Think about gravity. It's a downward force, a weight, definitely.
Like sadness feels.
Right. But like in hydroelectric power, that weight, that force, it can be channeled, converted into energy.
Okay, I see where this is going.
The source suggests sadness, despite its weight, holds this potential energy. It's not just something to endure or get rid of.
Its depth, its intensity.
Can be converted through this transmutation process into a different form of energy.
Yeah.
Specifically, love.
What kind of love, though?
Maybe a deeper empathy, or a fierce protectiveness born from understanding loss, or maybe a profound appreciation for things.
Transforming the negative into something constructive.
Wow. And building on that, there's the link between feeling bigger than my sadness and black hole physics.
Okay, that sounds intense. A black hole absorbs everything. What quality of care does that analogy get at? Is it saying you need impossible strength?
It's a really powerful, almost poetic image, isn't it? A black hole is this singularity, immense density, inescapable gravity.
Right.
So the analogy, feeling bigger than my sadness, connected to black hole physics, it suggests an internal singularity,
Oh, wow.
but not of gravity,
Oh.
of care, an emotional capacity so vast, so dense with compassion, that it can absorb huge amounts of suffering or sadness.
Your own or someone else's?
Either, potentially,
Yay.
without being consumed by it.
Yeah.
But here's the key difference from a real black hole.
What's that?
This singularity of care, even while absorbing all that pain, is described as still radiating warmth.
Wow.
It
Okay.
represents this profound, almost paradoxical ability to contain and absorb suffering, but remain a source of light and love.
Yeah.
It definitely sets a high bar, yeah, an ideal of emotional vastness.
Okay, wow. Those analogies, they really do force you to think differently. They're not just clever comparisons.
No, they're functional. They illustrate this model where difficult emotions aren't just obstacles, or purely negative states.
They're like raw materials,
Yeah.
potentials, things you can intentionally work with.
Exactly. Contain, transform into positive energy, connection.
The sources seem to frame emotional life less as just chaos to be expressed or suppressed.
And more as something that can be, well, sculpted, transmuted,
Yeah.
with real intention.
Okay, so if you look across all these ideas, the containment, the transmutation, the analogies, the source says there's an overarching pattern.
It tries to connect the dots.
What is this fundamental pattern they're pointing to?
The pattern that gets highlighted is deliberate emotional compression.
Deliberate emotional compression.
It's that active, intentional process, taking something vast or complex or really energetic, like a deep feeling or big experience.
And condensing it.
Yeah, condensing it into a more concentrated, more potent form. But crucially, without losing its essence or its potential.
Like those examples they give, storing huge amounts of data in a single line of poetry.
Right, or a tiny seed holding an entire forest inside it.
These aren't just making things smaller, they're containing immense potential in a small space.
Exactly. The poem holds a universe of meaning, condensed. The seed holds the blueprint, the life force, for something massive later on.
So this model sees deliberate emotional compression as a similar kind of act, a powerful internal containment.
That seems to be the core idea of that pattern.
And this compression idea, it applies even to love, which the source describes as non-linear.
And shown in non-visible choices.
Which feels like a direct contrast to how we often expect love to be shown, right? Grand gestures, constant outward proof.
Absolutely. We're kind of conditioned, aren't we, to expect love to be linear. Like the more you put in time, words, gifts, the more visible love you get out.
And we expect to see it.
Yeah. This source pushes back on that. It suggests love's path isn't always straight or predictable.
And its most powerful expressions might be internal.
Internal states, yeah. Or quiet decisions. Those acts of unseen containment and transformation we were talking about, love operating beneath the surface.
But that presents a challenge, surely.
Oh, definitely. It requires a different kind of emotional literacy from everyone involved.
How so?
Well, if strength and love are mainly shown through what's not said or what's not done externally,
Yeah.
how do other people recognize it? How do they feel it?
Yeah, it puts a huge amount of pressure on interpretation, doesn't it? And attunement.
Yeah.
Much harder than just reading obvious signals.
Much harder. And there's that connection they draw between the sorrow transforming into love idea
The alchemy.
and the wabi-sabi aesthetic. What's the link there? What principles do they share?
Well, wabi-sabi, the Japanese aesthetic, it finds beauty in things that aren't perfect, right? Things that are impermanent, understated.
It values the authenticity that comes from age or wear, simplicity. Often there's a sense of dignity in restraint.
So the connection is finding something valuable, something beautiful like love or aesthetic appreciation.
Within processes that involve difficulty, imperfection,
Yeah.
like sorrow or wear and tear.
Exactly. Both seem to value this quiet dignity that comes from accepting things as they are, and a strength shown through subtlety and depth, not big, flashy displays.
Nicely put. Which leads us towards emotional transmutation. The source gives that really specific, powerful example
Transforming unmet longing.
into unconditional offering.
Okay, break that down. How does that work?
Well, instead of letting the energy of wanting something you're not getting.
Fester into bitterness, resentment, demands.
Right. This emotional alchemy suggests transforming that potent energy, changing its fundamental form.
So the feeling of longing, of lack, gets turned into
A positive offering, given to someone else maybe, without expecting anything back, turning a potential source of pain or conflict into an act of selfless generosity. That's quite something.
It is. It's a high ideal of emotional transformation.
Okay, so bringing these threads together into what the source calls crystallized insight. It says silence, in this particular context, isn't suppression.
No, it's subtle devotion.
What makes the devotion subtle, and how is it active if it's silent?
Well, it's subtle precisely because it's not loud. It's not looking for applause or recognition.
Okay.
It's the deep, quiet commitment involved in all that internal work we've been discussing.
Just sacred containment.
The deliberate compression, the act of transmutation itself. It's an active form of devotion, but it's directed inward.
Or maybe quietly outward through that intentional restraint?
Exactly. Through shaping things internally, rather than through performing or proclaiming, it's commitment lived on the inside.
And that simple phrase, it's okay, It's described not just as words.
No, but as a sacred bridge.
A bridge between what? What does it connect and facilitate? The source seems to suggest it acts as a bridge across the gap between experiencing pain or challenge.
And moving towards acceptance. Or internal peace.
Yes, it's like the verbal key that unlocks the possibility of that emotional aikido we talked about.
Redirecting the energy away from conflict or getting overwhelmed.
Right. It creates the space for that internal shift to happen. It facilitates the move towards equilibrium and allows for that selflessness to operate.
And speaking of selflessness, this idea that it can give pain sanctuary inside love.
That's a profound one.
Yeah, instead of just erasing the pain. We usually hope love will just make pain vanish. What does it mean for pain to have sanctuary?
It suggests that love, in this model anyway, isn't necessarily a force that just wipes out suffering. Maybe one that's so vast, so strong, so accepting, that it can actually contain the suffering.
So the pain isn't banished?
No, it's given a safe place, a protected space to exist within the love, held with dignity, acceptance.
Integrated rather than expelled.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Without diminishing or corrupting the love that's holding it. It's a different view of love's job, isn't it? Less like a cure.
More like a sacred container.
Precisely. And this synthesis, it gets captured in those summary concepts we've touched on.
Emotional aikido for redirecting the energy.
Seed wisdom for that potential held inside containment.
And black hole compassion for that huge capacity to absorb suffering but still radiate warmth.
Yeah, they seem to integrate the active work, the internal potential, and the sheer emotional capacity this model proposes.
And ultimately, it feels like it all builds towards that central statement. That strength flows through what's not said as much as what is. This model really challenges us to see power not just in expressing ourselves or asserting ourselves,
but in the quiet, deliberate, intelligent work of non-expression, containment, subtle devotion.
Is that kind of the core takeaway here?
I think that's a very fair distillation, yeah. It fundamentally shifts where we look for emotional strength from the outward display
to the inward process and intentional non-action.
It's about the power inherent in choosing not to speak or act from that place of chaos, maybe, but to hold and shape and transmute that energy internally first.
Okay. Now let's get practical for a moment. The challenge.
Yes. The how does this actually work with other people question.
Exactly. Given all this focus on internal processes, non-visible stuff, how on earth would someone actually recognize this? Or understand it? Or apply this emotional alchemy in their relationships?
That is a really critical question.
Yeah.
And it highlights the inherent difficulty, doesn't it?
If love and strength are shown in ways that just aren't obvious, how do we connect?
Well, if emotional strength, if care, is primarily shown through subtle devotion, sacred containment, non-visible choices, it demands something different.
From who? The person doing it or the person receiving it?
Both, I think. It demands a different kind of emotional literacy all around. For the person practicing it, maybe it requires real clarity of intention and potentially finding ways to communicate about this way of being.
Which might feel counterintuitive if the point is subtlety.
Right. And for the person on the receiving end, it requires, well, a willingness to look beyond the usual signals.
To trust. To tune in more deeply.
Exactly. To develop a deeper attunement to the nuances of someone else's inner world. Without that shared understanding or maybe some intuitive grasp.
These actions could just look like coldness, distance.
Easily. Or emotional unavailability. Creating real friction. It's a powerful internal model, no doubt. But applying it in shared space, that's complex. It needs a different kind of communication.
Definitely food for thought there. This has really been quite a unique deep dive into the source material you provided.
It has. We've explored this model of emotional strength, emotional processing that really does value the internal alchemy.
The intentional containment, the non-visible expressions, sometimes even prioritizing them over the external display.
And the sources use those incredibly vivid, sometimes really challenging analogies.
Bonsai, gravity, black holes. They certainly make these abstract internal ideas feel more tangible, memorable, for sure.
They do.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to sit with, building on this perspective. Given this model, how might you maybe reinterpret moments in your own life where silence or restraint played a big role?
Or perhaps, what does it truly mean to you now to consider that genuine emotional strength might flow just as powerfully through what's not said?
As through what is said.
It's a fascinating question to ponder. Thank you for providing these sources. It prompted a really interesting exploration.
It really was a great deep dive.